It's F Around Friday, so we're going to talk about the players whose names begin with F. And let's start with Joel Farabee, almost the tale of two seasons for our buddy Joel.
I think he's a good person to start with because there's going to be a lot of chatter about him this offseason.
There's rumors swirling.
Yeah.
We're seeing articles pop up. Obviously, whether it's local or national people, we've heard his name at least mentioned.
Right.
First 48 games for Joel Farabee. That's October 12th to January 23rd. 17 goals, 40 points, 0.6, and a plus 11. That's a 68-point pace for the first 48 games. That is pretty damn good, especially on a team with zero power play that basically never scores. He
was one of the best 5-on-5 scorers in the league, both goal scoring and point production through those first 48-ish games.
Yeah, he was, when you looked at the 5-on-5 production, it was like, oh, it's like him and all the MVP candidates.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then in the final 34 games, January 25th to April 16th, 5 goals, 10 points, a 24-point pace.
It just seems like he never came back from the All-Star break.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what happened. If he got, it doesn't seem like he was injured.
I was going to say, we didn't hear anything
he's
about
playing in the World Championships, so this is not something you do if you are secretly nursing an injury.
One would think.
He's playing for Team USA. I don't know what happened, but whatever it was, he completely fell off a cliff from a production standpoint, and it was also by the eye test too. Like there are some guys where you're like, well, they're not scoring, but they're doing all the other things. Like Farabee's play just on the whole dropped off.
It
was very
wasn't
weird,
noticeable, and that's why I noted here his penalty minutes. It's not as if he's like going to be in a bunch of fights. He's not the most physical guy.
He does fight sometimes.
He has dropped the gloves before.
Yeah, more than you would think.
Yeah, more than when it happens, though.
He's American. He'll drop the gloves now and then.
Fair enough.
But in those first 48 games, 29 penalty minutes, 0.6 penalty minutes a game. Those final 34, 8 total, 0.24. I'm not saying, like, I didn't break down what his penalties were, but that speaks to me like a little bit of he stopped attacking. Like he stopped being aggressive, because when you're aggressive,
match with the eye test.
When you're aggressive, sometimes you cross check a guy, sometimes you trip a guy, like you're in someone's way and you interfere. And then when you have basically no penalties for 34 games, 4 minor penalties basically, that means you're not nearly as aggressive. Yeah. And is that just what it comes down? Like, we know how much he scored on the rush, how much like he was a contributor on the rush offense. Did all those things just kind of combine to, like, what the hell happened to Joel Farabee in the second part of this season?
It's an interesting theory about the rush offense because he was very good at creating. But what I loved about Joel Farabee,
not even just scoring,
especially in the first half, what I loved about him was that when he had the puck on a transition rush, you truly did not know whether he was going to shoot or pass, which made him a nightmare for goalies to deal with, because he could pass the puck and he could set up a teammate for a slam dunk goal, or he could beat the guy clean. And you have someone like Owen Tippett, like, well, yeah, he's going to fucking shoot. Even Konechny, you're like, yeah, he's probably going to shoot. Yeah. Farabee, it was 50-50. And I think his success on those plays spoke to the fact that he was truly unpredictable for goalies. It's an interesting theory that you bring up, that when the rush offense started to dry up a little bit, they weren't getting as many 2-on-1s, as many 3-on-2s, that maybe Farabee struggled to adjust and create off the cycle the way that the rest of the team struggled to create off the cycle. It's just that so much more of his offense was off of the rush that when it dried up, he really, really dried up.
That rush drying up really fucked the entire team. Yeah. Pretty good.
And, but I will say, in the past, Farabee, he's not, I'm not saying he's Wayne Simmons, Mike Knuble, or anything like that, but he does have a variety of ways to score.
In theory, he does. He has the skill to.
He's not small anymore. He's not huge.
He's bulked up a bit.
He's bulked up a bit.
He can stand to put on some more muscle, but he's definitely gotten a lot bigger than he was 3 years ago.
He's not the slowest dude. Like, he can beat you in a variety of ways, and we saw that a lot in that first part of the season. But it seems like when one thing went away, everything went away.
Could have just been a confidence thing too.
Yes.
One thing I found interesting, and we talked a little bit about this after the exit interviews, and I am notably a Joel Farabee fan. He was the guy I wanted the Flyers to draft in his draft year, so I'm really excited about that. I like his game. I like his style. One thing I did not like, though, was some of his comments at exit interviews, mostly because it seemed a little bit like he was, and you could tell kind of in real time that he started out by talking about how, well, my role changed. And then kind of like midway through his answer, he was like, but it's on me, you know, but like, it just struck me as like his first instinct was to blame the fact that he was playing down in the lineup at the end of the season, which is true. By the end of the year, he was on the fourth line. The thing was like, this was not a like, he had his role change and then his production drop.
No, yeah.
This was
the other way.
his production drop for a while, and then they moved him down the lineup because he wasn't scoring ever. And I really hope that he hasn't retconned it in his head to believe that it was the other way around, because like his role declined and his minutes declined because of the lack of production. It wasn't the role's fault that his production dropped. And I hope he hasn't convinced himself that he wasn't mostly to blame for this, because he was mostly to blame for this. And I say this as someone who really likes Joel Farabee as a player, but like, if he's wondering why he was on the fourth line the final 2 weeks of the year, like, he has to look into a mirror. It was him.
As a guy that covers him, does he strike you as the kind of guy who would do like a Provorov, where he's just like, obviously this isn't my fault, it's everyone else's?
I definitely do not think he would ever do that.
Okay.
He is definitely a team guy. He is a very good teammate. But I could see him getting very frustrated with Tortorella.
Yeah.
And then letting that maybe bleed into his play.
Like, from a pure depth chart analysis perspective, buddy, you almost have like top 6 minutes guaranteed to you because you're the only fucking natural left winger on the team. Like, if your role changed, it is simply because they could not play you on the first line anymore. You are the only left winger on the team.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, he's like top 6 because they were using Tippett on the left. But top 6, absolutely.
They're trying to figure out who else they can put on the left because it's a team of right wingers.
Exactly.
He's the only left shot winger that they have. And all of a sudden you're on the third or fourth line. Nah, man, it's because you're not scoring.
Yeah.
Like, they need you up there. You are a necessary component of this team, especially right now, because there's no one else who plays your position.
So here's what I will say about Farabee, and this is what I'm going to try to interpret his season to be, given the benefit of time. You can do the chop it up into 2 halves, and that's fair because he did drop off significantly. But if you're trying to evaluate his true talent level, we probably should look at his season as one singular whole. Yeah. Because that's what he did. Yeah. That's who he is. It's the same thing that I would argue last year, where it was like, you can't just throw out the first 30-something games of Morgan Frost's season because he played in those games. You can't just say they didn't happen. They happened. And if you're going to evaluate where he is as a player, that has to be included. It's the same thing with Farabee, where I look at his full season numbers, and I still do see a guy that, on the whole, if you're looking at overall his season, he did take a step forward. His points per 60 at 5-on-5, ranked 55th amongst NHL forwards. That's solidly in even-strength top-liner territory. At the very least, it's solid second-liner territory. He made a jump in terms of his underlying 5-on-5 play. He ranked in the 65th percentile by impact on expected goal differential at even strength. That's not amazing. It definitely was higher in the first half of the season, but it's still pretty good. It's in that like solid middle 6 area where you'd want a guy who's a second, third liner. So on the whole, if I'm evaluating his season as one singular season, not 2 halves, I would say that Joel Farabee, on the whole, played like a good second line winger. Now, do I want him to be better than that? Of course I do. And in the first half, he showed that for 4 months, he can be better than that. But I'm okay at age 23, 24 for Joel Farabee right now to be a second line winger. I just want him to keep improving from that point.
So that's actually a really interesting thing to think about, because if we flip those 2 halves, like, we're having a completely different conversation.
That's a really good point.
I was going to say, if we compare it to like Tyson Forster, who like one of the bright spots of this season was Tyson Forster. He didn't score a goal for the first 15 games. Yeah. And then he got hot, kind of cooled off again, and then he had a few really good months. April was but you know, the whole team sucked. Right, yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, Forster, I love this dude. Yeah. And Farabee, I'm like, ooh, yeah, I kind of, for the first time, wouldn't mind if he were to be true. You know,
Recency bias is one hell of a
I was
drug.
going to say,
It's
we're
really-
so good at recency bias as
but it's just like
humans.
the way you look at it, and it's when the games mattered most. But like I said, down the stretch, that 8-game losing streak killed them. Losing 11 of the last 13 or whatever it was killed them. And
Not good.
if they beat the Sharks in October, though,
Different conversation.
it's
Yeah.
if they don't shit the bed against Ottawa twice in the first half of the year, they're in the play. Those games count too. They count just as much.
Not wrong.
But you always remember the ones at the end because that's when the race is.
Yeah, and that's when the games have the obvious stakes rather than just the implied stakes. And that's something that Travis Konechny mentioned in exit interviews where, he more or less said one thing that he's going to take away from this is that bullshit game in November has just as many points attached to it as the important game in April.
Yep.
And we cannot take even one night, not even off, but just it won't matter. We'll catch up later. You can't do that in the NHL, especially when you're a team like the Flyers that's very much on the bubble.
If you're down,
maybe if you're Florida, it's whatever. We're gonna go on a 10-game winning streak at some point.
you're down 2-0 with 2 minutes left in the second. It's like, oh, dude, can we just go get to our dinner reservation? If this goes to overtime, I'm good.
Yeah.
No, you're not good enough to think that way.
Yeah, but I think the important part about this season in the short term for Joel Farabee is what does it do for his status on the team, because it's abundantly clear, and this isn't just a local thing, these are the national insiders as well, are mentioning his name as someone who, and this is my read on it, I do not think the Flyers are actively trying to trade Joel Farabee. But I do think the Flyers realize that if they want to get the high-end talent that they say they need, and they do believe they need it, it's not just us, they believe they need it too, they're not just going to be able to trade Ryan Poehling and get it.
No Hagen.
They're gonna need to give up something with serious value. And Joel Farabee, I just said, on the whole this season, he performed like a darn good second line winger. If you look at the season as a whole, there will be teams that will be very interested in making a hockey trade for a 24-year-old who is already a quality second line winger on a not ridiculous contract, who still could take a leap into being a clear-cut first liner.
Yeah.
He will have value. And if the Flyers decide they want to take a big swing on a guy, Joel Farabee, more so I think than someone like Cam York, someone like Tyson Forrester, they would be willing to give him up to make that kind of move.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why these rumors aren't, I think, surprising at all to anybody, is because of the whole recency thing, because you can look at the season as a whole and be like, I guess we could probably, there's probably other parts that we need more than we needed this year's version of Joel Farabee, especially a center. So, as much as we would like to just give up 4 or 5 shitty hockey players to get one good one, it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
So, like you said, Farabee is, I think, a good enough piece that if you are trying to make a hockey trade for a position that you need help in, like center, he's an obvious, I think, building block for that trade.
Yeah, you're not going to, and I know we keep bringing up Trevor Zegras. It's not even necessarily because Trevor Zegras is the only guy. It's just he's a guy who's theoretically out there. He's an easy person to throw out there. You're not going to get Trevor Zegras for a package centered by Bobby Brink.
No.
That's not going to happen.
It would be cool if it did.
And I know we've referenced this trade a bunch this week, but I think what did the Flyers need in 2009? Number 1 defenseman. How did they get him? Lucas Pisa, who was a first-round pick. Joffrey Lupul, who at the time, after the 08-09 season, he was 25 goals, 50 points.
Yeah, it's Farabee-ish.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Almost
Farabee-ish.
Exactly what Farabee just did.
So what you're saying is we're going to get...
I'm just saying, this is the kind of guy who it kind of takes to do something like that. That good, real good second line dude.
Yeah. So the one reason, aside from the fact that I just like Farabee's skill set, I would be bummed if they traded him. Now, obviously, if they traded him for
a Hall of Fame defenseman,
or just a really, really good young player, you'd get over it fairly quickly, especially if that really good young player immediately comes out and is great right off the jump. But one of the reasons why I would be hesitant to trade away Joel Farabee is that I do see him, I saw it last year, especially at the beginning of the year, and then really throughout the course of the year, you can see him developing into a leader. You can see him developing into a guy who the young guys look to. You know, he spent all of last summer in the Philly area. He was training like crazy at the facility.
Everyone lives with him, right?
He's like the guy who opens up his house to everyone. He is kind of a social leader, but I don't get the sense that it's in like a Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, we're going to party every night social leader. Like he keeps it fun, but not like too crazy where you're worried that any of these guys are actually doing any work at all.
Right.
I would be hesitant to trade a guy who I think could develop into a guy who is one of the cornerstone leaders of this team. Not saying I wouldn't do it. I'm just saying it's a factor you want to keep in mind because it does appear that he is over time developed. I heard multiple players when I talked to them about leadership that multiple guys, multiple veterans who on and off the record were like, yeah, Joel's like people are looking at Joel. I just think it's something the Flyers should keep in mind that, you know, maybe don't be too quick to dump Joel Farabee because he had a bad second half.
No. And I don't think, I mean, you guys went through all of Danny Briere's moves yesterday and like just looking over that, obviously a short list of things that he's done so far. The vibe isn't that he's going to just like give up.
It took an hour and 17 minutes to get through that short list.
Yeah. I'm assuming that if a trade is made involving Joel Farabee, it's not something that we're going to be upset about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to trade him for a draft pick.
Right.
Like unless it's like the 8th overall pick.
Right.
And then like, sure, I guess.
Dope.
Yeah.
Cool. That's fine. It might even be as good as Joel Farabee. Before we move on from Farabee, gut feel, is he here in October? And is he here when Michkov gets here?
Yes and yes.
I was gonna. If he's here in October, I would say that yes, he's gonna be here with Mitch.
Okay.
I think he's going to. I don't think it's like I'm not ruling out the possibility he gets moved. I think he is available. They are not hanging up the phone. But as I said on one of the shows this week, they were not hanging up the phone on Morgan Frost last summer. They were certainly not hanging up the phone on Travis Sanheim last summer. Like just because someone is available in theory does not mean that the Flyers are going to get the kind of call that will drive them to actually pull the trigger. I do think they like Joel Farabee. I don't think he's a guy they are itching to trade. I just think he's a guy they are open to moving in the right deal. If I had to bet, I would bet that right deal doesn't come around. But if it comes around, it wouldn't shock me.
All right. Morgan Frost.
We got a super chat. Before we jump into Morgan Frost, let's do a super chat.
Super chat from Matt Chipman. Hey guys, big fan from Canada. Great work. Who's your ideal 1C or 1D trade target in a potential Joel package? Lawton and Joel for Tim Stützle?
I mean, I would do that, but there's no way Otto would.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah,
I mean,
let's
we got
do
a
that.
guy there. Maybe he could.
I mean, honestly, like
You think he's a mole?
Yeah.
Truthfully, my dream trade, which again is another trade I do not think is going to happen, would be Quentin Byfield.
Oh,
You've been on him, yeah.
I think he's
That would
great,
be
and he's not even playing center because they have so many centers. But I think LA realizes that he's real good, and they're not going to move him.
All right, that would be an interesting one. Who would be my? If I could get anyone, yeah. Man, I
haven't thought hard enough about that.
Just because like it's so funny. I want Trevor Zegras. Like if we put that guy with John Tortorella, it's hilarious.
You know who I really like, and like it killed. I think it might just be because like every time he played the Flyers this year, he was fucking good.
Uh-oh.
I really like Alexis Lafreniere.
I was wondering,
like he killed the Flyers this year.
Yeah, I was wondering. Like obviously now, they probably are like, oh no, he's good.
Yeah, right.
Like him
There
or
was a
Kako,
second-
if you could somehow like steal one of them.
Yeah, just jump in that time machine.
Yeah.
Return it back to last summer and then
Yes.
make
I
like
don't know,
an
man.
offer that last summer would have seemed overwhelming.
Yes.
But after this season, it'd be like, nah, we ain't doing that.
Is there any universe though in which those two teams make a trade? I don't know.
I mean, they sent Lindros there.
That is true.
That's true.
I don't know if they've made any trades since then. It was like 25 years ago, but you know.
We all silly like the mayor.